let's say you're studying either Japanese or Spanish, and you decided, hey, a lot of people learn lots of vocabulary by watching movies, TV series, so I want to do the same. Is it a good idea, as you're watching movies in your target language, to use subtitles, or should you remove them completely? Are they helping out, or could they in fact be detrimental to your progress? Well, there is a lot to say, and in fact I want to say that the first answer I can give is, it depends. Let's dive into it. Hello noble ones, and welcome to Metatron's Academy, the channel where we explore how to learn languages in the most fun and effective way possible. And definitely, watching movies in your target language can be a lot of fun. And I myself, even to this day, not only have I learned a lot of vocabulary by simply watching movies and TV series, but I constantly do. So even now that I consider myself to have reached a reasonable level of fluency, my English is not perfect, but I'm fluent. As I watch movies or decided to watch a film together with my wife, occasionally we stop the film and I'm like, what does that word mean? She tells me, and boom, because she's native. And great, I've learned a new word, and it still happens constantly. So, movies, any form of interactive media, in fact this could be applied to video games, this could be applied to, as I say, TV series. All of this is great because, in fact, it works better than books, because when you read a book, sure, you can still be beneficial, don't get me wrong, I do that too, but you don't hear the native pronunciation of the words that you're reading. So something that can happen, and absolutely does happen, is that you read a word that you don't know for the first time, you know what it means, perhaps you even look it up on the dictionary, but then again you don't know how it's pronounced, or you mispronounce it, or we could say you pronounced it based on the individual matrix or pronunciation rules of your own native language, which can result sometimes not only in a heavy accent, but occasionally even in miscommunication or completely impeding communication with a native speaker. And that's in fact one of the advantages of watching a movie, playing a video game that is dubbed. You get to hear native speakers pronouncing the word, and you also see the word used or applied in a conversation. So yes, absolutely, watch all the movies you like. With that being said, what should you do with subtitles? The reason why I said that the answer really is it depends is because it depends on what sort of exercise you're trying to do and which of the many sub-skills of what we consider as a whole language fluency you wish to improve on that specific time. Let me explain. If you watch a movie without subtitles, it can be beneficial and it can also be negative. When I say can be beneficial is because watching a movie with no subtitles is in fact the most effective way to practice your ability to understand the language spoken. For obvious reasons, when you talk to a native speaker, it's not like subtitles appear underneath them, so the more you practice and get used to the idea of, well, I need to be able to understand a person speaking naturally at regular speed, also helping myself with a little body language and perhaps a little bit of lips reading. But in general, that's what I need to get used to, because eventually that's what you're gonna have to be able to do if you want to consider yourself fluent in your target language. So of course, this is the best one-to-one exercise or form of practice that you can have if the ability to speak and communicate freely with a native speaker is your target or goal, and of course it is. However, this sort of exercise can also have negative implications to your language fluency journey. Two sort of problems. First, if you are hearing a word for the first time but you don't see it written and you're still not perfectly in tune with the language, so you're not an experienced learner, what could happen is that you hear a word and you try to repeat it, but you are in fact mispronouncing it. You're learning it wrong because you didn't see it written, you only heard it spoken, maybe very fast, and therefore you might end up learning it wrong. Now of course this only applies to beginners. The moment you become an intermediate to upper intermediate student, usually you have enough experience to be able to at least recognize the word, also because at the end of the day you can rewind as many times as you want until you actually get the word. But I believe that the most dangerous aspect of practicing without subtitles is the psychological one. You see, even though this is the most effective form of exercise or practice that you can have when it comes to learning the language, learning to understand the language, it is also one of the hardest. And for beginners and even lower intermediate students, sometimes even up to intermediate, it can be very demoralizing to watch an entire scene of 5 to 10 minutes understanding close to nothing. And of course this will happen. Also, depending on your own personal experience with learning language and your level of willpower, your personality, this might not be a problem for you at all. I mean, at the end of the day, when I was practicing this sort of listening without subtitles in Japanese, it wasn't really demoralizing for me because I had already reached fluency in English. So I already knew that eventually, if you keep pushing, you'll get there. But for someone who's approaching their second language for the first time, they might convince themselves, and they're wrong, but they might convince themselves, gosh, I don't understand anything. I've been listening for an hour and I don't know, I don't understand anything, so I never will. You know what, I'll just give up. Now they are wrong, because 20 minutes of listening is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. However, if you do 20-30 minutes of constant listening, watching movies in the target language with no subtitles every day for 3 months, oh my gosh, if you'll see an improvement. You'll see a very tangible improvement. But a lot of students will never get to the end of the 3rd month because they want immediate gratification, which is a huge problem with language learning. This is why I usually suggest, if you are an intermediate or upper intermediate student, or you are someone who already has experience, or you have someone with a personality of freaking iron, do it, absolutely. It's going to be fantastic and it's going to give you a lot of results. But if you are a teacher and you think some of your students might, be impacted very negatively from this, then don't do it. Wait for them to first gain some experience and have them watch these movie clips with subtitles. Or better yet, if you want to kind of mix it up a little bit, you could have someone, or yourself as well, you could watch the first, say, 2-3 minutes. It can even be a 30 seconds exchange from, I don't know, The Matrix, when they are talking, Morpheus and Neo, they are talking, you listen to it for 30 seconds, no subtitles, then you stop it, you try to focus, you're like, okay, I could guess maybe 2 words, I have no idea what else they said, go back, now put subtitles, rewatch the whole thing a few times, so you get used to it. Oh, okay, so that's what that word was I couldn't recognize. If I had seen it written, I would have recognized this. It was a pronunciation problem. Therefore, you watch it 2-3 times with subtitles, then you remove subtitles again and try and rewatch it. And you can do that periodically. And it's a good way to mix these up. Also because, again, it gives you a chance to see how the word is actually written. And it also gives you time to write it down in your notes if that's something you do. I personally do. So a mix sometimes can be better, particularly if you are, again, on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to still your skill. It's important to be realistic with how you assess your own ability. It's good to mix them up. What's important, however, is to also understand that these are different exercises. If you watch a whole movie, or the first 20 minutes of a big conversation chunk of a movie, and you do it with subtitles, it's great because you're learning pronunciation, because you see the words, they pronounce them for you, and you're like, okay, so that's how it's pronounced tough, even though it's spelled Tough, and I thought it was going to be something like Toug. So tough, great, you can hear actually how they pronounce it. It's still kind of good because you get a sense of the rhythm, pace, and musicality of a language, and also gives you time to pause, write down a few words. You could write down a lot of words, in fact, if it's kind of a movie that dives into topics that you haven't really had much experience with. So it's still a great type of exercise. It's just that what people sometimes make a mistake with is not that studying or watching a movie with subtitles is not good. It can be really good for your reading ability, for your pronunciation, for your vocabulary, new vocabulary acquisition. It's just not very good for your listening. So if what you do is you watch 3 movies with subtitles and then you expect to be able to go talk to a native speaker as they speak naturally and fast and be able to understand everything, and then you're like, oh, all of that time was wasted. No, it's just that you weren't practicing actual listening in a full capacity, in the sense that, as they say in Latin, ubi major minor cessat. So where there is something major, whatever it is that is there that is minor will cease to exist, in the sense that you are using reading. You're reading the words. So why should your brain even put any energy into trying to understand the spoken words if you're using something that is much easier and you're still understanding what the heck is going on? You kind of prevent your brain to practice trying to understand what people are saying out of their sounds they're producing alone. So if you want to learn to listen and understand, so listening and comprehension, you've got to remove the subtitles. So my strongest suggestion in this case is the following. Do a mixture. And also, again, it depends on what level you are. But if you're an experienced learner, then I would say, yeah, just do like a 10% with subtitles, do a 90% with full-on spoken language. If you're an intermediate student, you could easily do a 50-50. You're watching your story, watch it with subtitles, and go back, watch it without. Maybe first time trying a little bit with subtitles and whatnot. If you're a beginner, I would still do it, but just a tiny little bit if you are someone who could be highly discouraged, or if you're a teacher and you think that your students are that kind of, you need to be able to read the personality of your students. It's very important in order to, make your lessons as effective as possible for them. As an ultimate situation, if you are a beginner, but you have had experience, you have absolutely no problem, you don't care, you don't get demotivated, you're really pumped up, then absolutely you could easily do an 80% listening, 20% subtitles. I wouldn't remove subtitles completely from your daily routine, because it's always good to see them, to visualize the words, and it helps you to just write them down. Do the occasional subtitle. Eventually, for everyone, you will have to get to a point where subtitles will be removed if you really want to learn to understand people speaking the language fluently to you. It's just that sometimes it's important to do it in the right time in your journey, language learning journey, and to also be careful not to overdo it at the very beginning, because it is a tough practice, because it does not give you instant gratification or reward. The reward will come, but only at the end, after you keep working on it. But it will happen, and eventually, as the months go by, the entire language will slow down in your ears, because your brain will be so used to these sounds that you're exposing yourself constantly to, that it will take your brain a lot less power and a lot less time to process and recognize each word, even if they are fluently spoken within any given sentence. And because it will take your brain less time to do it, then it won't matter if they say it fast. At the moment, for example, for me, whether it be Japanese, whether it be English, it doesn't matter what any native speaker says. It doesn't matter how fast they say it, I'll understand it as long as I know the words. And that's, now in Mandarin, with my Mandarin, I'm not exactly there just yet, but I did make a lot of progress exactly doing that. I did 6 months of continuous listening, no subtitles, if not the occasional, and that really brought me initially, whenever they would speak, if it was something I was very confident with, or something I was used to because I used it many times, I would understand them. But the moment they would step into something I wasn't as confident about, even though I knew the words, they were speaking too fast, I couldn't understand it. But after focused, no subtitle listening for 6 months, I would watch a movie or I would speak to a Chinese person at a restaurant, and I'd be like, finally, freaking finally. But again, it took time, and believe me, even for me, even though Mandarin is my fifth language if you consider Sicilian, at first, I didn't understand much. And in fact, that's the whole situation when it comes to something that I like to call the mountain of language learning. So every student begins at the bottom of a mountain, and then it's an uphill slope. And it seems like, gosh, this is so hard, and it's always going to be this hard. So a lot of students stop before reaching the top of the mountain. Thing is that those who do reach the top of the mountain, what they don't know is that with every language, it doesn't matter what language you're learning, now the mountain is a downhill. So the way you can recognize, the way you can know whether you are on this side or this side of the mountain is this. When you speak the language, or when you listen or watch a movie, if after a given conversation, if you count the number of words you understood, and you're like, I think I understood 2 or 3 words of that conversation, you're on the left side of the mountain. But if you count the number of words you didn't understand, and you go, out of the whole conversation I didn't understand 2 or 3 words, you are on the right side of the mountain, and it means now you're going down. And you will get there. And this kind of exercise, no subtitles, listening, it's hard, but it's very effective. And even if you don't see the progress immediately, you will see it after a month, after 3 months, after 6 months, and so on. Alright, number ones, but I hope that this was useful, that you found it fun. And as always, if you have a question, let me know in the comments. And thank you very much for joining Metatron's Academy.